And the best debater today was Miss Aishwarya Menon.
And without further ado, now let me invite the first debater from the government's team, Honorable Aishwarya Menon, 25 years old, a future educator, currently pursuing her studies at University Pendidikan Sultan Idris or UPSI. So without further ado, Honorable Aishwarya Menon, to present your statement for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and the members of the floor. And I'm honored to initiate the grounds of the motion today with a piece of news by Asia Sentinel that defines the gist of this debate. In 2016, in the wake of the 1MDB scandal, the then Prime Minister revealed he sustained the loyalty of party members' tradition using money from his personal account that was funded by a foreign donor for the 13th general election. Now, let me tell you why this is disastrous. Firstly, there is no regulation on how much he spends on his intra-party affairs. And secondly, he faced no legal repercussions back then for accepting millions of ringgit from an undisclosed foreign donor. Well, I don't deny Malaysia is a well-constituted nation, but I just wish there weren't as many loopholes. For instance, the Election Offences Act of 1954 only mandates a spending limit for the general election campaigning period with no restrictions on funds and expenditure before or after the stipulated period or for intra-party elections. Ironically, we're living the reality where politicians aren't afraid of receiving donations, but their donors are, fearing the discrimination from the executive arms of political parties. We have a dire need for a political financing framework that equally empowers the 3 key stakeholders, which are the politicians, the financiers, and the electorates alike, against political corruption. And this can only be achieved by, number 1, reforms of agencies responsible for monitoring political activities, such as the Election Committee and the Registrar of Societies, and number 2, active measures to curb monetized politics, and this is why an amendment is necessary. I understand the opposition might question the sustainability of such amendments. First, monitoring agencies have to exist independently from the executive arm of the ruling party. Instead of housing the Election Committee and the Registrar of Societies under a ministry, we should have an office for public prosecutors that can give them an impartial appointment to high-level positions, impartial monitoring and enforcement capabilities, as well as prosecution of election offenses, such as the discrimination of political financiers. A nation's politics is never meant to be a shady business, and hence political funding and expenditure should be made available for public scrutiny. Existing laws underlying political financing ethics should be amended to include public laws restricting permissible amount of donations and impose conditions to fulfill as a donor instead of sweeping it under the rug. Privatized and foreign donations should have a maximum threshold of contribution to a single source, and cash donation should possibly be avoided. And finally, any companies at all costs that have a stake or administrative power to the government should be restrained from becoming political financiers. In our paradigm, political financing is an outlet the masses look for to see the change the nation needs, empoweringly, and politicians are the leader of the nation instead of a faction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Aishwarya Menon, for the very energetic introduction as the first speaker of the government. Please welcome.
So I would like to ask a question to Ms. Aishwarya in regards to her speech, which in her proposed amendment, cash donation is avoided. So may I ask, with regards to the amendment, what is your proposed solution to that? And maybe you could quote some reference for your amendment. Thank you.
I'm not going to make the second mistake. Honorable Aishwarya Menon, please respond within 1 minute.
Thank you, Ms. Anis Afina, for the question. Firstly, I would like to clarify the part in this debate in which the reason why we are having such a high amount of focus on cash donation is the fact that there is no much regulation on the funding that's received by an individual politician is used for election or it's going to be used for general activities that's been conducted by the party, because as how the debate has progressed, we have no laws that regulate or audit or is made mandatory for the parties to actually provide the financial reports, the expenditure reports that's done on behalf of the party instead of the individual. So when we are limiting cash donations, when it comes to running politics, there are lots and lots of other factors that can source in between as a form of assistance. For instance, to actually look out for the technology or the machinery that one could use to run an election, and this could be the type of assistance that we can focus on instead of cash donations.
And now I see Honorable Aishwarya Menon from the government is raising her hand, so please welcome.
Thank you. And I would like to address this question to Mr. Umar Farouk, talking about the media coverage that the ruling party has in terms of election. I would like to take an example of the previous general election where the ruling party BN had lost considerable amount of support and trust from the public, primarily due to the fact that they were re-electing members of parliament who were previously convicted with offenses related to political financing. However, they've been put back into election because they were part of a faction or they were part of a favoritism that's happening within the party. So isn't this an example that even though we are having a good media coverage, citizens are still able to see if a political financial law has been breached, and such a situation is actually going to cause more chaos during election as well as on the political front in general, even though the media coverage were to be biased on either sides?
Thank you very much, Honorable. Please welcome Honorable Umar Farouk from the opposition to respond.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Thank you, Speaker and Aishwarya. Regarding the last general election, there's a big cases of one MDB, and then there's a lot of cases by other MPs in the government political parties concerning corruption and money laundering, as well as a lot of money from contracts that they have taken to their own pockets, and not even sourcing the money that they have taken to their own political parties or for their political party for campaigning and events. And this is because when there's a blast of corruption, there's a blast of money laundering that happening news as well. A lot of people voting for the opposition because applications like Instagram, Facebook, media socials are covering this blast corruption, this blast of one MDB and also money laundering. Thank you.
And now I see Honorable Aishwarya Menon from the government, if you would like to ask any question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to address this question to Ms. Anis Afina. As far as I'm concerned, we from government have clearly stated how there are loopholes in the current system, and we have clearly stressed on why an amendment is necessary instead of enacting a completely new law, which is also what came from the side opposition as well as his speech earlier. So may I know, how does your paradigm actually differ from what we are trying to propose in the debate all along?
Thank you very much, Honorable. So now I would like to welcome Honorable Anis Afina from the opposition to respond.
Thank you, Ms. Aishwarya. So, how we differ from the government side is when you're enacting a new law, it will be more time consuming. And I should agree that both sides agreed what are we actually concerned about: institutional reformation and also audit report, and plus on the spending limitation. So our stance is, instead of we have to consume more times, why don't we just have maybe I would like to say shortcut to just insert what we are concerned in in our current legislation. So it is what makes the both side government and opposition different. So amendment, the new law or political financing act actually would not resolve the root cause. If we have still the problem, we still have a problem of lacking of enforcement, and also the capacity of the election commission did not enforce. So we will do that in the current legislation. Thank you.
And now I see maybe the final people to ask the question. Honorable Aishwarya, if you have any more curiosities to ask, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to address this question to Mr. Amir Aiman. As far as I'm concerned, members of the government have clearly stated what are the problems of the current law. And we talked about institutional reform, and we also talked about how to regulate existing political financial law. And a part of the law, we have clearly stated that we are going to put a limitation and more regulation on privatized funding, which is also inclusive of corporate funds. On the opposition's end, in your speech earlier, you said that this law is going to cause a ban on corporate funds, which is not exactly true. So don't you think the opposition has actually gone way too far-fetched in seeing what are the bad effects this law could bring in comparison to the worst case scenario over your paradigm, in which the nepotism factor would still be prevalent even if these laws were not to be present? So how can you explain the fact that without these laws, and with such a flawed perception of what we could bring, the opposition still stands with their stance?
Thank you very much, Honorable Aishwarya. I think Honorable Amir Ahmad is becoming very popular right now. All questions toward him. So please, 1 minute is for you.
As like we discussed before, the selected authorized sources will be depends on the government, on the favor of government. That's why, which signifying that there will be only selected sources that will be allowed in providing political funds. And also, if you said about the limitation on the political funding, the thing we do not realize is that the list of sources or the limitation of the funding will be set on the favor of government, corporation, since they are the one who will decide the selections of authorized sources. Hence, the aim of improving the integrity will the aim of improving the integrity of political environment will be unsuccessful because of the nepotism vibes, meaning that this nepotism is caused by the enactment of the law. If you see, if we set a limit of funding political, that's why I oppose this motion. Thank you.
So now we still have a few more minutes to go. Supposedly it ended already, but upon the request from the organizer, maybe it is very hard to determine who is the best debater, since all of you are totally good. So now I have been given some jurisdictions to ask you question personally from me, no bias to government or the opposition. So to answer my questions, probably one or two questions, I want a representative from the government side and also a representative from the opposition. So for this first question, maybe the government would start first. Any one of you, the first one to click their raise hand button. All right. Okay. So we have been discussing about law at length. So every one of you have been saying about laws, about acts, about jurisdictions. And now I want to retract this discussion back into political reality or political context. All right, about the grassroots, we have been so fascinating discussing about the politicians, discussing about institutional reforms, but we somehow forget about the grassroots level. This issue of political financing laws in Malaysia is totally new in our country, unlike in developed or civilized country, especially at the West. So how do you want to propose the most effective way for us to educate and also to increase the awareness of the grassroots that this issue is equally important as the economic issue? Because in context of Malaysia, it's always bread and butter issues. It's always about economic first. It's always about unemployment first. I don't think so a lot of people give their much attention to this very vital issue. So how do you want to convince? How do you want to educate the public about the importance of this issue? So maybe from the government? All right, I see Honorable Aishwarya representing the government, please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say that this issue primarily goes back to the fact that there is a lack of political awareness among the public. The first thing that we would need to do is to let the public know that there are two different types of elections. One, it's the general election, that is the popular one, the common one that the public would be involved. And the other one is the intra-party elections, where members of the same party would be electing for a particular position within the party, which would affect the political front in the larger scale. And most of the frauds, most of the political financing issues are happening at this level because people are generally misappropriating the funds that they receive in the name of the party for their individual purposes and benefits to vote by, or to actually convince people in the party to vote for them because they would be able to provide more and more money to them. So it's becoming more of like a faction instead of a normal election. And this is the thing that we need to educate the public about, on what are they supposed to know and what can the government as well as the public do to avoid this situation.
And move on to what we've been waiting for. So, just to re-emphasize, it was a really high quality debate. Everyone had different arguments, different styles. All of them worked really well. I think I speak on behalf of all of the judges, saying everyone did a fantastic job. But there is one, there can only be one best debater on the day, and the best debater today was Miss Aishwarya Menon. So congratulations, and I'll pass it back to you, Iman.
Thank you so much to Mr. Luke for the closing speech just now. Congratulations, Aishwarya.